Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. I just posted a video that focuses on the first part of Step 3. This video will focus on the last 4 words, as we understood Him. It involves quite a bit of history and conjecture, some of it totally unnecessary, but all of it interesting. So let's begin. The 12 Steps were published in 1939 in the book titled Alcoholics Anonymous, otherwise known as the Big Book. The reason it was called the Big Book was because the first printing used extra thick paper to beef it up. And although all subsequent printings used standard paper, the name stuck. Here is another interesting fact. The fellowship took the name Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of the book, not the other way around. It wasn't until after the book was published that what was loosely referred to as the Alcoholic Squad of the Oxford Group broke from the Oxford Group and became Alcoholics Anonymous. Here's another interesting fact. Before settling on the name Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. humbly suggested the Bill Wilson movement, which was promptly shot down by the fellowship. This I find interesting. Bill was a humble man, but he was also human and had an ego. I love his humanness. In any event, the book was published, and Step 3 in both AA and later Alanon have not changed since then, which include the words, as we understood him. However, the original draft of the 12 Steps did not include as we understood him, because in the minds of Bill W. and Dr. Bob, official co-founders of AA, they had a specific God in mind, and they called that God, God. Those 4 words were added later on to placate some of the agnostic members of the group. About 10 years later, while being interviewed, Bill W. admitted that those were the most important words in all of AA's vocabulary because, in his words, it created a hoop wide enough for a universe of alcoholics to pass through. Bill had no idea how wide that hoop was because it allowed not only a universe of alcoholics, but also a universe of addicts, gamblers, overeaters, codependents, adult children, and every other fellowship to pass through as well. And thank God for that. So, adding that qualification was really good. However, it's still quite limiting, is it not? God can be anything you want God to be, as long as it's a Him. And I suspect Bill had a specific Him in mind. You see, Bill W. and Dr. Bob actually got sober in the Oxford Group. The Oxford Group did not specialize in alcoholism. Rather, they were open to anyone with any problem or issue. They believed that if you followed their 4 spiritual practices and 4 absolutes, that your problems would be solved. Many of these practices and absolutes were actually incorporated into the 12 Steps. But the most important thing to know about the Oxford Group is that they began in 1921 as the First Century Christian Fellowship. They believed, in a nutshell, that one should follow the original teachings of Jesus and not worry about all the rules and dogma of organized religion. Oxford had a very specific idea as to who and what God was, and so did Bill and Bob. So, when Bill W. was pressed to expand or open up who or what God could be, and he added, as we understood him, with a capital H, I think it was likely with a wink and a nod to Dr. Bob, because we all know who him is. How do other fellowships handle this issue of not limiting what God can be? ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is a more recent fellowship, modified Step 3 to read, God as we understood God. To me, that's perfect. ACA also has an unofficial set of steps, which uses only the words higher power in all of the God steps. I think that works too because God and higher power are synonymous. The reason I'm talking about this is because God is a central component of the steps and therefore of program. Half of the steps, 6 out of 12, mention either God, higher power, or spirituality. Step 12, the last step, suggests that we practice these principles in all of our affairs, which really means practice these steps in all of our affairs. Bill uses the word steps and principles interchangeably in the Big Book. He considered the steps to be 12 spiritual principles. Practicing the steps in all of our affairs is what makes them come to life. It's what keeps one's life in order. It's what leads to and maintains the spiritual awakening which is promised in the same step. However, this can only be done if it's second nature, and it can only be second nature if there is no resistance. So, if you are comfortable with the words Him or God, then fine, continue to use them. However, if you are uncomfortable in any way, you have the right to modify the wording to reflect your understanding of higher power. The program police will not arrest you. Even if you're asked to read Step 3 out loud at a meeting, hold your head up high and read it your way. It may encourage someone else to do the same. Personally, my working definition of God is blank, and I have no desire to fill in the blank. In fact, leaving it blank is an acknowledgement that it is impossible to fill, so don't even try. It only distracts from feeling the presence of God. So when I see the word Him, it throws me off kilter. It becomes an obstacle. So I ignore that word. I'm sure that anyone still listening has been patiently waiting to find out what happened to the Oxford group after the alcoholics split off and started AA. Well, in 1938, they changed their name again to Moral Rearmament, and then yet again in 2001 to Initiatives of Change. If you look at their website, you have no idea whatsoever as to what they do or what they stand for, other than change. What are they so bent on changing? From what I can tell, their name. It seems like they are a fellowship whose primary purpose is to keep changing its name. So it was a good idea for Bill W. and Dr. Bob to jump ship and start AA when they did. And thank God of our understanding for that. And thanks for listening, and keep coming back.